I mean, I just took advantage of the situation. If it's gonna stay together, I was gonna throw it out of there. He must have stacked these logs and not had a roof on it for a little while because these are actually graying a little bit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long, you know, like 3 months.
He was never the loudest man on Barnwood Builders, but somehow Johnny Jett became its soul. With his weathered hands, soft Kentucky drawl, and quiet mastery of old timber, he embodied everything the show stood for: respect for history, integrity in craft, and humility in success. Viewers saw in him not just a builder, but a living link to an older America, where work spoke louder than words. Yet, as the seasons passed and his on-screen presence faded, whispers began to grow louder than the hammer strikes that once defined him. Was he ill? Had he retired? Or worse? Amid a whirlwind of wild rumors, we'll unveil what really happened to Johnny Jett from Barnwood Builders. Let's dive in right away, before the show. Johnny Jett's story begins far from the bright lights of television. He was born in 1949. While Chicago, Illinois was his birthplace, Jett's lifelong identity is rooted firmly in rural Kentucky, particularly in Fleming County, a small wooded region near the Licking River that shaped his earliest years. He grew up in a working-class family at a time when America was shifting from post-war optimism to the uncertainty of the Cold War era. The Jett family's ties to the land and to their Methodist faith were strong, and that grounding in faith and hard work would become defining features of Johnny's character. His father, Eugene "Gene" Jett, was a steady figure in the local community, while his mother, Leota Hawkins Jett, nurtured the household with quiet resilience. Fleming County's modest schools were where Johnny's fascination with craftsmanship and machines first appeared. Local accounts recall him as a curious boy who preferred hands-on work to textbooks. This pattern would foreshadow his later career. In the early 1960s, as industrial work became scarce in small-town Kentucky, young men like Jett often turned to technical trades for stability. After finishing high school, he attended Morehead State University for a semester, but soon realized that formal academia wasn't the path for him. Instead, he enrolled at Maysville Community College, where he trained as a draftsman. This period also marked Jett's growing independence. He learned the value of skill over status, of doing something well, even if few noticed. By 1969, America's war in Vietnam had reached its most turbulent years, and the draft touched nearly every rural county in the country. Johnny Jett was among those called to serve. At age 20, he was drafted into the U.S. Army, and by 1971 was stationed in Vietnam, where he applied his drafting and mechanical background to engineering assignments rather than frontline combat. His time in Vietnam was marked by disillusionment and hardship. The long months overseas exposed him to the chaos of the war and the temptations that surrounded soldiers far from home, including widespread substance use that became common in military camps during that period. Jett has spoken candidly in later years about encountering controlled substances among troops and about the difficulty of maintaining discipline in an environment where boredom and fear intertwined. Rebuilding his life after Vietnam was not easy. The United States in the early 1970s was a country still struggling to reconcile with the war's cost, and many veterans returned to limited opportunity and emotional strain. Jett found work with his father at the local water association, taking on repair and maintenance jobs that drew on his practical skills. But rural labor also gave him time to rediscover purpose. He began tinkering again with wood, restoring small items for neighbors, and slowly gravitating toward old barns and cabins that dotted the Kentucky landscape. In an era when many rural families were abandoning wooden farmhouses for modern materials, Jett saw the beauty and craftsmanship of 19th-century hand-hewn logs and believed they deserved to be preserved rather than discarded. By the 1980s, Johnny had joined forces with his brother Billy and his longtime friend Sherman Thompson, both of whom shared his respect for old timber work. The trio began dismantling abandoned cabins and barns across Kentucky and West Virginia, hauling the weathered logs to new sites where they could be reassembled. This was hard, dangerous work that required both physical endurance and an intuitive understanding of wood grain, joinery, and balance. Jett developed a reputation for his patience and precision, rare qualities in an industry that often prized speed over care. The men often worked with little more than crowbars, forklifts, and sheer determination, carefully numbering and stacking each timber so the structure could later be reconstructed exactly as it once stood. They were, in essence, early preservationists working without fanfare, rescuing pioneer architecture from rot and oblivion. Their work predated the reclaimed wood movement by decades, long before the trend became popular among designers and builders. At the time, salvaging 100-year-old barns was viewed as an eccentric pursuit, not a business model. But Jett saw something deeper in those aging boards: the craftsmanship of early settlers who built not for decoration but survival. In those beams and dovetail joints, he recognized the fingerprints of men and women who had carved their lives from the Appalachian wilderness. He felt connected to them, as if every reclaimed beam carried an echo of the people who built it. That sense of continuity gave meaning to the labor. The turning point in Johnny Jett's pre-television journey came in 1998. Mark Bowe, a young entrepreneur and former coal miner from West Virginia, was then searching for suppliers of historic logs for his new company, Antique Cabins and Barns. During his travels through Kentucky, Bowe heard about a skilled craftsman named Johnny Jett who was known for his meticulous dismantling work. When the two met, they discovered a shared passion for preserving American pioneer architecture. Bowe later recalled that Jett was initially ready to quit the business, weary from years of physical labor and the instability of self-employment. But Bowe's enthusiasm convinced him to stay, and the partnership that followed became the foundation for what would eventually evolve into the television show Barnwood Builders. In those early years, before the cameras arrived, Jett and Bowe's collaboration focused on sourcing, relocating, and restoring 19th-century log structures for private clients across Appalachia. Their projects often involved traveling through back roads, documenting each structure, dismantling it by hand, and reassembling it in a new location, a process that could take weeks or months. They worked out of a small base in West Virginia, relying on a tight-knit crew that included Sherman Thompson and a few others who would later appear on television. This pre-show period was the crucible that shaped Johnny Jett's reputation as a craftsman and his philosophy toward wood restoration. It was an era defined not by fame, but by dedication, when long days, rough conditions, and meager pay were redeemed by the satisfaction of preserving a fading heritage. By the time Barnwood Builders was conceived for television in 2013, Jett had already spent more than 40 years perfecting his craft. The show would simply bring national attention to what he had quietly been doing for decades. That was, saving pieces of American history, one beam at a time. Roll on Barnwood Builders. When Barnwood Builders first aired on the DIY network on October 7, 2013, it introduced a kind of television rarely seen before, a show where heritage, craftsmanship, and humility took precedence over drama and competition. Produced by Silent Crow Arts and based out of Lewisburg, West Virginia, the series followed a group of West Virginian craftsmen led by Mark Bowe as they salvaged and restored centuries-old barns, cabins, and log structures across the Appalachian region. The concept was simple but profound: dismantle forgotten wooden buildings that once defined early American rural life, preserve the materials, and reconstruct them as living pieces of history. Over time, the show evolved into a chronicle of American pioneer craftsmanship, capturing the artistry and grit that went into every hand-hewn timber. By 2025, Barnwood Builders had run for 19 seasons and more than 170 episodes, shifting from DIY Network to Magnolia Network and Discovery Plus, maintaining one of the most loyal audiences in home restoration television. Having already worked with Mark Bowe for over a decade before the show's creation, Johnny Jett joined the television crew not as a personality, but as a craftsman. The man who could operate nearly any piece of machinery and do so with a calm precision that bordered on artistry. His primary role within the Barnwood Builders team centered on dismantling, safely taking apart structures built in the 1800s or earlier without destroying the integrity of the original wood. This process required not only strength, but an understanding of old-world joinery, mortise and tenon joints, hand-forged nails, and dovetail corners that no modern builder learns from textbooks. Jett's decades of experience made him indispensable. When viewers saw him maneuver a forklift to lift a century-old beam delicately from a collapsing barn, or drive a loader across uneven ground without so much as shaking a loose board, they were watching mastery earned through 50 years of labor, not a script. His nickname among crew and fans, the Machine Whisperer, wasn't just a joke. Jett's ease with forklifts, loaders, and cranes allowed the team to move materials efficiently across rugged mountain terrain, a necessity when salvaging structures that often stood in remote hollows of West Virginia, Kentucky, or Tennessee. A typical dismantling project required lifting logs weighing between 400 and 700 pounds each, often stacked in walls 15 to 20 feet high. Using machinery incorrectly could splinter beams or endanger workers, but Jett's steady hand kept operations fluid. His understanding of both the tools and the timber was evident in every episode, whether he was balancing a 1,000-pound sill log mid-air or using ropes and levers to ease a structure down piece by piece. Viewers often remarked that he worked with an old-fashioned grace. The chemistry between Jett and the rest of the Barnwood crew became one of the show's defining features. Alongside Mark Bowe, Sherman Thompson, Tim Rose, Graham Ferguson, and later members like Ryan Franklin and Alex Webb, Jett embodied the old Appalachian ethos: hard work, humility, and humor. Each episode highlighted not just construction, but camaraderie. Between long hours on job sites, the crew shared jokes, swapped local stories, and cooked simple meals over open fires, all captured by the production team to preserve authenticity. Jett's understated humor and Kentucky drawl provided balance to Bowe's leadership and Sherman Thompson's quick wit. For many fans, he became the emotional anchor of the series. Beyond his technical work, Johnny Jett contributed something that transcended building: a deep respect for history. Every barn and cabin the crew salvaged came with a story: dates carved into door frames, initials chiseled into beams, hand-cut nails still wedged in place after 150 years. Jett often paused to point out details others might overlook, reminding the audience that this weren't just boards. They were relics of early American life. Some of the barns they dismantled dated back to the 1830s, built from chestnut and white oak timbers harvested before the chestnut blight wiped out the species in the early 20th century. Others were Civil War-era cabins, whose logs still bore axe marks from builders who likely cleared the land by hand. Jett treated each beam as a piece of history that deserved dignity in its second life. Over time, Barnwood Builders transformed into more than a renovation show. It became a record of cultural preservation. The program often worked in partnership with museums, historical societies, and private owners who wanted to conserve the craftsmanship of early settlers. In one memorable episode, the crew reconstructed an 1850s cabin for the West Virginia Heritage Farm Museum in Huntington, turning the salvaged structure into an educational exhibit for visitors. Jett's attention to authenticity helped ensure that the rebuilt cabins retained the soul of their origins, using traditional joinery and period-accurate methods. no modern shortcuts whatsoever. Away from the noise of chainsaws and log lifts, Johnny Jett revealed another side of himself, an artist. His paintings and drawings, many of which depict rural barns, Appalachian hills, and woodland scenes, mirror the same reverence for nature and simplicity that defines his building work. His art, often created in oil or watercolor, shows a careful eye for light and texture, particularly the weathered patina of old wood. According to the Celebs Info, his artwork has attracted collectors who appreciate both its technical detail and emotional authenticity. He paints the landscapes he's worked in for decades, the same valleys and ridgelines that framed his job sites. In interviews, Jett has said painting allows him to express the quiet beauty he sees in decay, the way an old barn slumps under its own weight, yet still stands proud. This blending of craftsmanship and art reflects his understanding of beauty not as something made perfect, but as something earned through endurance. His dual life as builder and artist also reflects the Appalachian tradition of self-reliance. In regions where resources were scarce, people learned to create with what they had: wood, iron, or paint scraped from leftover pigment. Jett's art has been exhibited locally in West Virginia and Kentucky, and he often donates pieces for charity auctions tied to veterans organizations and community causes, quietly continuing the sense of service that shaped him since his Vietnam years. As Barnwood Builders expanded its audience through Discovery Plus and Magnolia Network, reaching millions across North America and beyond, Johnny Jett's role remained constant. He never sought fame, interviews, or personal publicity. Instead, he continued showing up to job sites with the same humility he had when dismantling barns for a living before the show existed. Fans often note that while others might speak of preservation as a philosophy, Jett lives it daily, through action, not words. But where is the man now? The rumors after the show. When Barnwood Builders became a long-running success, a quiet storm began brewing online, one that had nothing to do with timber, craftsmanship, or restoration. It centered on Johnny Jett. As the years passed and his screen time fluctuated, the internet began to fill with rumors of his death. The first wave of confusion surfaced around 2018, when online users began sharing a death notice for a man named Johnny Jett, who had passed away in Houston, Texas. The obituary circulated on small obituary aggregator sites, often stripped of context or date, and it was quickly reposted by entertainment blogs looking to capitalize on the name's recognition. At first glance, the details appeared plausible: an older American male named Johnny Jett, a familiar Southern name, and a death year that matched when the show was between seasons. Within days, fans of Barnwood Builders began to post condolences on Facebook and YouTube comment sections, unaware that the deceased was a different individual entirely. Sites such as Net Worth Post and Otaku Cart later confirmed that the obituary belonged to a Texas resident who had no connection to the show or its cast. But by then, the rumor had already gone viral, fueled by reposts and recycled content from clickbait news outlets. These unverified pieces often used recycled photos of Jett from Barnwood Builders, pairing them with captions like "Remembering Johnny Jett, 1949 to 2018. The absence of an immediate statement from the show or its network only amplified the confusion. Barnwood Builders was known for its tight-knit, low-profile production team, and unlike many reality franchises, it didn't issue press releases about the personal lives of its cast. Another factor behind the rumor's persistence was Johnny's personality itself. Off-camera, he led an exceptionally private life. Unlike co-stars Mark Bowe or Graham Ferguson, who occasionally interacted with fans through social media, Jett had little online presence. No verified social media accounts, no public interviews, and no personal website meant there was no direct channel to confirm his status. To devoted fans, this quiet disappearance from digital spaces seemed suspicious. When newer seasons aired with fewer shots of Johnny on screen, often replaced with younger crew members operating machinery, audiences assumed the worst. Message boards and fan forums began to discuss whether he had retired, become ill, or even passed away during production. The speculation peaked again in 2020, after Barnwood Builders moved from DIY Network to the Magnolia Network, following Discovery's corporate restructuring. The transition coincided with schedule reshuffling and production pauses due to COVID-19, which delayed new episodes. Internet users, once again, began rehashing the same unverified claim that he had died quietly at home, often citing each other rather than any credible source. Some even misused local news articles from Fleming County, Kentucky, by lifting unrelated death announcements of other residents. However, by 2023, several reliable outlets, including Celeb Clive and Kenya's Tuko News, published fact-checked reports clarifying that Johnny Jett from Barnwood Builders was very much alive. They traced the rumors back to a pattern of mistaken identity. The obituary that started it all referenced a Houston man who shared both name and birth year, but not profession, family connections, or geography. Moreover, network representatives and production sources quietly confirmed that Jett was still part of the team, though his appearances were limited by schedule and the physical demands of the job. Given that Jett was born in 1949, he was 75 by 2024, an age where long days on construction sites, often in remote mountain regions, would naturally take a toll. The myth persisted partly because viewers equate screen presence with activity. In later seasons, especially seasons 15 through 18, episodes featured Jett less frequently, often in shorter scenes focused on supervising machinery or sharing brief reflections rather than heavy physical labor. This shift, easily explained by age and crew expansion, was misinterpreted as evidence of illness or departure. Some even claimed that he left after season 11, though production logs and new episodes disproved that claim. There was no official statement from Magnolia Network or the producers about Jett's retirement or death. What truly happened was far simpler. He had stepped back from the most strenuous work while remaining involved in projects and continuing his artistic pursuits. That artistic side provided further confirmation of his continued activity. Local art enthusiasts reported new works being attributed to him throughout the 20s, many of which were sold or donated through small community fundraisers. His paintings, depicting Appalachian landscapes, cabins, and forest scenes, appeared at regional craft fairs and online galleries based in Lewisburg, West Virginia. This ongoing output suggested not only that Jett was alive, but that he remained creatively active. Maysville Online, a local paper that had covered his early collaborations with Mark Bowe in the 1990s, mentioned in a retrospective that Jett continues to be part of the preservation movement, both on and off screen. The persistence of the rumor highlights a modern dilemma. In an era of instantaneous information, the absence of direct communication is easily filled with falsehood. The Barnwood Builders production team, operating out of the Appalachian Mountains, was never designed for public relations firefighting. Their ethos, quiet work, steady purpose, contrasted with the sensationalism of online media. For fans used to celebrities posting daily updates, Jett's silence appeared ominous. Yet, for those who knew him, it was simply his nature. He had never been a self-promoter, and fame had not changed that. His focus remained on work, family, and faith, the same principles that guided him from his first cabin restoration to national television. By 2025, multiple fact-checking reports, updated cast bios, and even new footage in Barnwood Builders episodes conclusively debunked the false claims. The show's continued success, airing on Magnolia Network and streaming through Discovery Plus, still featured Johnny Jett's name among its veteran crew. Fans who visited Antique Cabins and Barnes' official channels, the company run by Mark Bowe, found occasional photos of the crew, with Jett appearing in team shots as recently as 2024. No obituary, death certificate, or credible family statement ever surfaced because there was nothing to announce. He was still alive. The truth, verified through multiple independent sources, is that Johnny Jett, veteran builder, artist, and Vietnam-era Army draftsman, is still living a quiet life between Kentucky and West Virginia. His screen time may have diminished, but his influence on the craft of American log preservation endures. What really happened to Johnny Jett is not tragedy or mystery, but continuity. A craftsman slowing down but never stopping, choosing privacy over publicity, and leaving the noise of rumors behind, while the legacy of his work continues to speak for itself. Personal life and relationships of Johnny Jett. Johnny Jett's marriage to Donna Jett is a private, enduring bond that contrasts sharply with the bright, camera-lit world of Barnwood Builders. Donna is his lifelong partner, and together they raised a son, Johnny Gene Jett, who remains similarly shielded from public scrutiny. They wed in the early 1970s, a time when Johnny was returning from his service in the U.S. Army and beginning to carve out a life in rural Kentucky. Despite decades of television exposure, Johnny has never invited the cameras into his home or family life. He rarely discusses Donna or his son publicly, and when interviews touch on his personal relationships, he deflects, emphasizing instead the work and history preserved through his craft. Those who know him describe a marriage built on mutual respect and shared values rather than performative display. Friends and colleagues note that Donna has long been a stabilizing presence in his life, supporting his demanding schedule. The Jett household itself has remained rooted in the Appalachian region, somewhere near the Kentucky-West Virginia border, in a setting that mirrors the rustic beauty Johnny restores on screen. Evenings at home are simple and grounded. Family dinners around a worn wooden table, evenings spent sketching or painting, and quiet conversations on the porch overlooking the hills. It is here that Johnny's artistic side, his detailed sketches of log cabins, barns, and landscapes, finds its truest expression, far from the lens of television. Johnny and Donna's son, Johnny Gene, occupies a similarly private sphere, with few public details beyond acknowledgement of his existence and occasional mentions in fan commentary. The family has grown to include grandchildren, though their identities and lives remain carefully protected from media exposure. Friends of the family describe the relationships as close-knit, with multi-generational bonds reinforced through shared experiences in the same Appalachian landscape that shaped Johnny's early years. These connections reinforce a sense of continuity. Crew members recall that Johnny often references his family when making decisions on site, whether in assigning tasks, preserving timber, or instructing younger builders in delicate joinery. Donna's support, though largely invisible, is credited with allowing Johnny the freedom to commit to long, physically demanding projects without distraction. Anecdotes from production crews and local neighbors suggest that she handles much of the home management, letting Johnny focus on his craft and the occasional artistic project. There are no public disputes, no social media spats, and no celebrity-style events. Johnny's preference for keeping family life private has shielded them from intrusive speculation, including the spate of false death rumors that circulated widely online. Interviews with crew members often highlight his calm, patient demeanor, as rooted not only in years of experience, but also in a strong, stable personal life that prioritizes connection over recognition. Observers note that this stability allows Johnny to approach work with clarity, focus, and the gentle guidance of someone who has long known the value of endurance, both in marriage and craft. In behind-the-scenes snapshots of the cast of Barnwood Builders, Johnny is often the first to arrive, the last to leave. His longtime collaborator and friend, Mark Bowe, once noted that many nights were spent at Johnny's cabin in Fleming County, where the crew would unload logs, swap stories, and pass around a cast-iron skillet of fried cornmeal while the Ohio River Valley dusk settled. It's in these moments that the public persona, forklift operator, veteran, artist, meets the private man, one who keeps his boots muddy, his hands busy, and his heart tethered to home. Beyond the heavy machinery and reclaimed timber, Johnny nurtured an artistic side that many fans overlook. As a teenager, he sketched the cabin he grew up drawing near the creek in Goddard. A local artist, Cliff Johnson, critiqued one of his early paintings of an old man rocking on the front porch of a log cabin and told Johnny he left too much detail for the imagination. Johnny, he said later, didn't listen. His paintings of weather-worn barns, Appalachian ridges, and twilight-lit timber beams became side ventures he modestly shared via a now inactive website, johnnyjettart.com. Often, a fan or fellow crew member would commission a piece. Johnny would set an easel in his workshop, amidst sawdust and spilled pigment, capture the light falling across a denailed joist, and quietly mail the finished piece east or west. Johnny's closest bonds are of the lifelong collaborator type. His friendship with longtime companion Sherman Thompson dates back to the early 1990s, when the two dismantled log cabins together in Kentucky and West Virginia. Theirs was a brother-in-craft kind of connection, marked by silent respect and shared sweat, rather than flamboyant gestures. Family lore says that after Sherman suggested splitting the profits from a cabin pull, Johnny simply nodded, lifted his worn Tonka truck, and together they road-tripped into the holler. Behind the scenes of the show's filming schedule, Johnny is known to host small gatherings at his cabin in Fleming County. He often invites younger crew members or local helpers to share a meal. One resident recalls a summer evening when Johnny caught a channel cat from the creek, smoked it over a fire pit, and the cast sat around talking about finding the right timber, the right story, rather than scripts or guest stars. That night, Johnny walked the younger builders through how to lay a beam gently into place so the grain wouldn't split. Tragedy entered Jett's life in 2017 when his son, Johnny Jett, passed away. The loss hit the craftsman deeply, though he seldom addresses it publicly. In interviews, he simply notes the importance of following your savior where he leads. Within the tight-knit world of the cast, the crew rallied. Mark Bowe and Sherman Thompson quietly helped carry a cabin beam, dedicating that project to the memory of Johnny's son. Faith plays a subtle, enduring role in Johnny's everyday life. Raised in a Methodist church in Shiloh, where his father served as superintendent of the Water Association and maintained the plumbing business, Johnny learned early on that service and structure were linked. He occasionally participates in community events in Fleming County and West Virginia, seeking no spotlight but offering his time. Whether teaching young people how to sketch a log cabin or speaking quietly at rehabilitation meetings about his own brush with addiction to controlled substances during his post-Vietnam years. The personal life of Johnny Jett doesn't clamor for attention. It settles into the timbers, roots into the land, and holds fast in the company of trusted friends. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.